Good afternoon. Hello, this is Peskov. How can you hear me?
Good.
I beg your pardon for making you wait. We are starting another working week. It is June 8th, Monday. Putin is starting this working week in the Kremlin. You know, there were tense Thursdays and Fridays for the president last week. The St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. There were a lot of news, the most important news from the president. You were all witnesses to this. Today, the president is holding a working meeting in the Kremlin, an internal meeting. The general director of the United Infrastructure Company, Andrei Puchkov, will give a speech. This is the most important area of activity. You know that for several years now, the VTB Bank has taken on the burden of supporting this industry. Puchkov has headed this area of work. The government continues to allocate significant funds. Today, the head of state will give a speech on the first tangible results of the USSR's work. All other events are not public. There are no major events scheduled for the president today. As for Putin's schedule, do you have any questions? Komsomolskaya Pravda, please.
Alexander Gamov, Komsomolskaya Pravda. The St. Petersburg Economic Forum turned out to be very bright. But due to certain reasons, circumstances, there was more attention on this issue in the political sphere. At some point, economic issues were put on the back burner. Nevertheless, yesterday, the results were recorded. Contracts amounted to about 6.6 trillion rubles. 142 countries took part in the forum. How does the St. Petersburg Economic Forum evaluate the situation in the Kremlin? The president is in the Kremlin, but also in the Kremlin. Thank you very much.
Alexander Gamov, Komsomolskaya Pravda. First of all, we are all grateful to you for such detailed information about the forum. I think it was very interesting for everyone. Listen, the forum has long been firmly on its feet as an international event. Events that are expected not only in our country, but also by international investors, international business, which, as we have long agreed, despite all the illegal sanctions, continue to remain on our market. We continue to be interested in attracting foreign investments. This was also discussed in the president's speech and in the panel discussion that took place. And of course, all business representatives are showing unwavering interest in the forum. And this is reflected in the very figures that you have mentioned in detail.
Thank you. Thank you. Olga Volkova, RIA Novosti. NATO is starting exercises today, which will be held in Finland and Norway. Dmitry Sergeyevich, can we say that the approach of NATO military infrastructure to the borders of Russia is already an irreversible process? What will Moscow do to counter the possible threats from the alliance? And will the Russian military monitor the course of these current exercises?
I don't quite understand your question. The answer is so obvious. Naturally, the approach of NATO military infrastructure to our borders has been taking place for several decades. And, of course, this process is the subject of the most thorough monitoring by our defense ministry, first and foremost. And Russia is taking the necessary measures to ensure its security against the background of the processes you have outlined.
Starmer, Macron, and Merz made joint statements after meeting with Zelensky in London. 5 conditions of truce in Ukraine were mentioned, including the statement that the EU leaders support direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, with the participation of the United States and European countries. What is the reaction of the Kremlin?
The reaction of the Kremlin was voiced even before this statement was made. It was voiced on Friday by the president during a discussion at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. The president said that in the current conditions and in the background of the actions we see from the Kyiv regime, terrorist, criminal, aimed at children, it is very difficult to imagine how to negotiate with the Kyiv regime now. In addition, I would like to draw special attention to the fact that Macron, Starmer, and Merz are trying to talk about peace and at the same time accentuate their intentions to assist the Kyiv regime in the production of new types of weapons for the continuation of the war. Is this inconsistency? Is this not a big contradiction? And does this not better demonstrate the true intentions of the European capitals?
Thank you very much. Dmitry Antonov, Reuters Agency. Mr. President, Pashinyan's party wins the elections in Armenia with 49.8% of the votes. How does the Kremlin assess the results?
I will refrain from making any official comments at this point, because no final results have been announced yet. We are waiting for these final results. For now, we are carefully recording all the messages that appear around these elections, including the messages about the numerous violations that took place during these elections.
The second question is about the situation in Crimea, where today a drone hit a passenger train, which caused the movement of passenger trains in Crimea to be stopped. In addition, there is a shortage of energy sources, food, and so on. What is the Kremlin's assessment of what is happening?
Of course, the relevant authorities are working to ensure that there is no shortage. We see a lot of agitation, completely unreasonable agitation. Let's remember how a couple of years ago, in Moscow and other major cities of our country, they bought buckwheat, while there was no shortage of buckwheat. Sometimes such emotional actions lead to awkward situations. But again, all the authorities are working to ensure that there is no shortage. But the main thing, probably, in this is exactly what you mentioned. This is a hit on a passenger train. This is a criminal act of the Kyiv regime. Of course, such actions significantly complicate any further attempts to move to a peaceful settlement. We remain open to this, but you see that the Kyiv regime itself is doing everything to slow down this process.
To continue my colleague's question about Crimea and the supply of fuel. After all, for a long time, the sale of benzene was limited. At one time, there was a limit on the sale of cash benzene. In general, do you see a threat of a fuel crisis in Crimea due to the isolation from the mainland of Russia?
Measures are being taken to prevent this from happening. Our energy ministry is working on this. At the moment, there is indeed a certain problem, and a complex of measures are being developed to correct this situation.
Thank you.